Hi, I'm Vincent Silva. I'm here with my friend Tyler Mack. We're here today to talk about estuaries and things about them. An estuary is a tidal mouth of a large river connecting it to a stream.
Yep, so we've come here to Bolsa Chica, the Bolsa Chica estuary, right by the Bolsa Chica beach, where the saltwater sea is able to connect with the freshwater body of the stream over here.
The Bolsa Chica estuary has lost more freshwater wetlands than saltwater. Now freshwater at Bolsa Chica is restricted to 4 places: a brackish runoff pond at the end of Springdale Road, a swale and cadle marsh fed by runoff from the Sea Cliff Golf Course, a very small marsh about 5 feet by 15 feet at the south end of Bolsa Chica by PCH that is fed by runoff from PCH, and lastly, brackish water upstream in Wintersburg flood control channels.
Estuaries are nurseries of the sea. The protected environment and abundant food provide an ideal location for fish and shellfish to reproduce. They are commercially important fish species spend part of their life cycle here in the estuaries. It allows them to be good spots for fishermen and provide food for us humans.
Many fish, including American shad, Atlantic menhaden, and striped bass, spend most of their lives in the ocean, but return to the brackish waters of estuaries to spawn.
So estuaries are natural filters due to the high seagrass and swamp areas around it. It causes for natural filters that both help out the saltwater and freshwater areas of the water. Not only that, but due to these vegetation, it also acts as a natural buffer between the two areas, helping stop sea flooding and coastal storms from entering into more like populated areas near the estuary environments.
Estuaries are the natural buffer of the world, with marshlands preventing coastal floods from not only running waters leading into further upland, but also protecting land organisms and preventing real estate damages.
Marine life is highly abundant in estuary. Vertebrates and invertebrates alike come to estuary in order to migrate and in order to mate. Fish like the sea bass, mullets, and pipefish spend most of their younger years in an estuary until they are ready to make the voyage out to sea.
This unique combination of salt and fresh water creates a variety of habitats for plants and animals to live in. Some common estuarine habitats are oyster reefs, kelp forests, rocky and soft shorelines, submerged aquatic vegetation, coastal marshes, and deep water swamps.
The abundance of invertebrates in estuaries is surreal. As they make up 97% of the world's species, it is only natural a large amount would be found here. At Bolsa Chica, there are numerous amounts of invertebrates, but for the more common ones, we'll start off with phylum Porifera, also more commonly known as just sponges. So, some interesting facts about sponges are they actually only have cells, no tissues or organs, and they filter feed water through their pores in their body, and they exit out their osculum, kind of like an anus or a mouth. Another phylum is phylum Nadaria, which consists of sea jellies and anemones. Some common sea jellies are actually the moon jelly, and there's also a giant green anemone, sunburst anemone, and strawberry anemone found at Bolsa Chica. Some interesting facts are they actually have 2 stages. It's either the polyp stage, which is where they're sessile and do not move, or they have the medusae stage, which is where they're actually mobile. And also, some of these phylum have a nematocyst, which is a stinging cell. Next up is phylum Platyhelminthes, which actually consists of tapeworms and flatworms and leeches, flukes. They're actually the first organisms to have cephalization, where they have a head, eyes, and brain. And also some interesting facts are they have 2 penises and are called hermaphrodites since they have to reproduce with this thing called penis fencing, where they actually fight and kind of wrestle out to try and inject each other so one becomes the mother and one becomes the father, since there's no set gender for them.
Going off of fish, actually, estuaries provide more than 75% of the habitat for the U.S.'s commercial fish catch, and an even greater percentage just based off recreational fishing. In turn, These fish actually provide about $4.3 billion in revenue towards the U.S. economy just based off fishing alone.
Estuaries are large players inside the economic sense of modern society. Not only do they provide jobs through recreational use, but they're also very utilized inside the economic sense of transportation and shipping by creating many harbors and many ports that we utilize.
Millions of people visit estuaries each year to boat, swim, watch birds, and other wildlife and fish. Coastal recreation and tourism generates about $8 to $12 billion per year in the United States alone. Rhode Island itself has more than 85 marinas, 28 yacht clubs, 16 boat builder associations, and 9 sailing schools. Also, they have 100 public launching sites and swimming at more than 100 different beaches.
There are 102 estuaries in the United States alone. According to the EPA, 28 have been designated by their states and the federal government to be of national importance because they are the most productive natural systems on Earth. The Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the United States and is one of the most productive bodies of water in the world. The Chesapeake watershed spans 64,000 square miles, covering parts of 6 states.
Many birds come to the estuary for migration, and some have made it their permanent homes. Seagulls, for example, have made an estuary their permanent homes all year round. Estuaries provide critical homes for species that are valued commercially, recreationally, and culturally. For a lot of animals, it is a temporary home during migration, mostly for birds.
Many species of birds depend on estuaries for food and nesting areas. Migratory birds use estuaries as stopover points for resting and feeding before continuing their journey. Estuaries provide stopovers for migratory bird species such as mallards and canvasback ducks. The double-crested cormorant is a marine bird in class Aves, which has nested in Bolsa Chica, which allowed us to get a few shots of it during our visits there. They are highly abundant all year round, but especially during the fall and winter season, which is what we are in currently. The estuary has become a hunting ground for the cormorants due to its high supply in fish. Cormorants have mastered the art of fishing and hunting in this estuary and swim about with ease.
Marine and terrestrial mammals also utilize estuaries as feeding grounds and nurseries. All of these organisms feed in estuaries since a healthy estuary can actually produce about 4 to 10 times more organic matter than a cornfield of the same size.
The crab-eating frog is an animal from class Amphibia that is known to live in estuaries. As its name gives hint, it is known for eating crabs. Crabs are very abundant in estuary and spend many of their adolescent years in an estuary, which gives time for the crab-eating frog to make its move. Now, the frog-eating crab is native to southeastern Asia, including Taiwan, and according to the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve website, it has not been seen anywhere near this area. This frog is just one example of an animal that thrives in an estuary setting.
Next to me we have Poecilus pilaris, also more commonly known as the coyote bush. This is a coastal sage shrub, which is found between the coastal regions and the chaparral regions. As you can see here, a coyote's bush is dioecious, so that means it produces both male and female parts on different parts of the plants.
So here we have Heterotheca grandiflora, also known as the telegraph weed. Telegraph weed is part of, just like the coyote bush, part of the coastal sage shrub family. Alright, so right now we have a pretty new bush. It doesn't have its spores ready to release yet, but back here, right here, we have a finished telegraph weed that has its spores ready to release by the wind and to respawn at will.
Behind me we have Swad nigra, or also more commonly known as seepweed. Seepweed is a halophyte type of plant which thrives inside salty environments, such as an estuary, where it's able to soak in the salty area or the salty water coming in from the sea and conglomerate inside a giant area known as a salt marsh community.
Dartmouth's Celia Chen, a research professor of biological sciences and a project leader in Dartmouth's Toxic Metal Superfund research program, and her colleagues shed new light on mercury pollution in the waters of the northeastern United States. Her study is on mercury, which is transformed into methylmercury in water. This is a global pollutant that actually damages human health. A lot of people in the United States are exposed to this methylmercury by eating just fish, particularly from the open ocean and coastal fisheries. Pretty much all 50 states have had fish consumption advisories pertaining to mercury, and these estuaries act as a repository for this methylmercury. In her first paper, the research studies show the production of methylmercury over several years in different environmental conditions, one in the city of the Great Bay Estuary in New Hampshire. They found that the differences in the type of mixing of the sediments due to worms, mixing by water currents, and in the kinds and amounts of microorganisms that affect the amount of methylmercury in the sediments, the availability of the fish to obtain methylmercury in estuarine systems is dependent on the amount of methylmercury that is produced in sediments, and these concentrations are highly dependent on the chemical and physical conditions of the sediments. The activity of organisms burrowing in the mud and the amount of mixing due to currents and waves affects the amount of methylmercury produced and the available to marine organisms. These factors vary greatly even within ecosystems. In her second paper, the researchers studied methylmercury in sediments in the water column in coastal cities in the northeastern United States. They found that there was no relationship between the sediment and methylmercury and the water column methylmercury, which indicates that sediments are the only source of methylmercury to the water column. The findings suggest that upstream sources may be important, particularly in wetland-dominated ecosystems, and that sediments are the only important source to coastal fish. Many earlier studies assumed that sediments were the most important source, as this is the largest reservoir for methylmercury within an estuary. But the transfer of methylmercury from the sediment to the water column is complex and is not strongly correlated to the net rate of formation of methylmercury. Their earlier studies show that water column concentrations are the most predictive of methylmercury concentrations in fish. And so, the lack of relationship to sediment is particularly important since contaminated sites are most often evaluated and remediated based on the mercury sediments.
Mostly the fact is, humans are destroying estuaries, and it's up to us to try and stop these, to preserve these beautiful land areas.
Some Native Americans called estuaries the between-land because they are not quite land and not quite water. Tokyo, the most populous city in the world, was originally known as Edo, which means estuary. Tokyo Bay is an estuary formed where the Sumida and Arakawa rivers flow into the Pacific Ocean. The earliest civilizations in the world developed around estuaries. In what is now Iraq, developed around 3800 BCE near the estuary of the Euphrates River where it met the Persian Gulf. During that time, was a sophisticated urban area. It had a population of above 60,000 at its prime. Its estuary was the most important port on the Persian Gulf. It had ships carrying trade goods from places such as India, the Arabian Peninsula, but in order to get to there, it had to pass through Ur's wetlands and food plains provided a rich source of wild game and allowed for the development of irrigation and agriculture. And today, is now an archaeological site. It's pretty inland from the Persian Gulf coast, and the landscape has changed a lot. The estuary of the Euphrates is now about 300 kilometers or 186 miles away. Many modern cities have grown around estuaries, including Jakarta, Indonesia, New York City, New York, and Tokyo, Japan. These urban areas have undergone rapid change and put their estuaries at environmental risk through land reclamation, pollution, and overfishing.
As usual, humans are negatively impacting this environment constantly. One of the hugest threats is human pollution. Toxins such as chemicals and heavy metals threaten the environment daily. Another huge factor is urban developments, which have impacted estuaries heavily due to human growth in population. Another huge threat is draining, filling, damming, or dredging estuaries. We do so to create more farmlands due to the estuary's high nutrient deposits. They have also been drained due to urban expanding. Agricultural activities can also harm the environment due to runoff water and chemicals from farmland, which destroy and deteriorate estuary environments. Chemicals found in manure, such as phosphate, can affect the nutrient growth levels of certain algae in estuaries, harming the environment. Other factors include untreated sewage, overfishing, urban developments altering temperature in the ecosystem. All in all, humans have been negatively impacting the environment for a long time now, and it's only been recently that people are starting to understand the importance of estuaries inside human society.
All over the world and throughout history, estuaries have been utilized by people as an area of produce, trade, and transportation. And we can continue to utilize these estuaries as parts of our environment, as long as we respect the creatures living here and we continue to protect and preserve the environment around us.